Hi, my name is Meg Forney, and I'm running for Minneapolis Park Board, District 6 Commissioner.
And we're back talking with Meg Forney, Commission 6 candidate for Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And we're pleased to have with us Mark Andrew, someone who, as a former Hennepin County Commissioner, you must have represented some, if not all, of District 6.
Pretty much all of it, yep.
And Mark, currently, he's the founder and president of Greenmark, which sounds fascinating. Briefly, what is that?
It's basically an environmental marketing company that focuses on large-scale sports building projects.
Well, you'll never be
so
looking for
things
work
like
with that.
arenas, stadiums, ballparks around the country.
Great. We're here to talk about park issues specifically, and this is a critical time. I think it's a historic moment for the Minneapolis parks. This notion of whether or not the park should be kind of blended into the city superstructure, the municipal superstructure, become a department or be part of a department, or stand alone. So the idea of an independent park board is front and center in this election. Mark, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, nothing is more fundamental to the health and vibrancy of cities than its park systems. And part of the reason I've always supported an independent park system and candidates like Meg is because there will be a commitment to the overall quality without regard to what's happening elsewhere in the local government.
I couldn't agree with you more. And to me, it's always been a concern because the city is dealing with nuts and bolts such as police and fire, whereas the park board, what they are there is to be the stewards of the parks. And an example is that on the north end of Lake Calhoun, presently there's 8 high-rises that are violating, shall we say, the shoreland overlay, which is basically 2.5 stories. And the city is advocating for those types of things. There's going to be another building that's going to be built, whereas the parks have stood firm in not allowing that. And we need to have that division of 2 different missions that don't necessarily have to conflict with each other, but they need to be separated from each other.
Absolutely, and I think, to that point, park systems have an impact on pretty much every facet of quality of life in urban areas. If you have a healthy and a well-maintained park system, you generally find areas where crime is low. You generally find, with high-quality parks, open space, green space, you generally find property values that are high. You generally find opportunities for employment where you find a lot of opportunities for recreation. And so, the value of parks isn't just about aesthetics or recreation. It's also about shoring up tax base, and it's also about having positive impacts on overall quality of life. And that's what part of the reason I'm fearful of having a park district that's completely operated by a city council is the cities are under siege today. They don't have enough money to do what they want to do, and there's a high risk that they're going to make penny-wise and pound-foolish decisions around park space and park policy for the benefit of getting short-term gains to shore up their budgets on a year-by-year basis.
When your experience with Hennepin County and the Three Rivers District, now that was set up in a particular way for some of these same reasons, wasn't it?
Yeah, for some of the same reasons, and like the antipathy that currently exists between the City Council and the Minneapolis Park Board, some of those same reasons were political. And I think that issue is going to be unavoidable on how we ultimately resolve governance decisions around parks. But in the case of Three Rivers, the original structure was that the people of Minneapolis, taxpayers in Minneapolis, were paying property tax levies for both the Minneapolis system and the Hennepin County park system. And the people in Minneapolis were primarily using their own park system and not so much using the suburban system. Whereas in the suburban communities, suburban property taxpayers were only paying once for the suburban system, but they were using both park systems quite a lot.
I have to thank you also, Mark, that you were one of the authors for the Independent Park Initiative. And as you know, I advocated strongly for that as well. I believe that we still need to further that discussion. We do have a significant charter amendment that's going to be on the ballot regarding that, and I'm strongly suggesting to people to oppose that, because we do need to keep our independent park board. And advocating for it even more independent would allow us actually to have better funding relationships with things like, as you've indicated, the Department of Natural Resources, the Metropolitan Council, even Three Rivers. And I think that those types of challenges, financial challenges like that, are going to be hitting us harder and harder. And so we need to build those relationships, and by being more independent and not absorbed into the city structure is going to give us that opportunity.
I think all park lovers ought to be grateful to you, Meg, for staking out that position, because it's going to have profound implications for the future overall quality of our parks. So I hope you continue to advocate strongly for as independent force as possible from the governance of the Minneapolis Park District, and make sure that we are adequately funded now and in the future.
Well, and speaking of that independence, do I have this right that an independent park board could negotiate with other levels of government, whereas a park board that is part of a city department might not have that leeway? Do I have that right?
Yes, definitely. Most other entities look at us, well, as a department, and so they do not want to align themselves and get into that particular funding relationship with us.
Yep.
Okay, here's kind of a hot button topic, and I don't know what each of you feel about this, but I get asked when I was getting signatures for the petition to get on the ballot, well, if it's independent, won't my taxes go up? How does this work? What's the dynamic, whether it becomes part of the city or if it spins out and becomes a truly independent park? I mean, how does taxation work?
Well, first of all, let me say, the Minneapolis park system today is underfunded. There is no longer adequate funding in the Minneapolis Park District to do what needs to happen to continue to keep our park system as a world-class system. And so I think, number one, we need to look at that and confront that problem. But raising property tax is only one possible solution to the structural problem. And I think Meg is talking about things that are very visionary and very thoughtful and very forward-thinking in terms of discovering ways to exploit, in the best sense of the word, new revenue streams that do not involve raising property taxes. And I think Meg has talked about that a little bit. Strengthening the city's relationship with state agencies, such as the Department of Natural Resources, developing greater impact on metropolitan-wide park policy, park funding programs, tapping into newly discovered streams of revenue, stimulus funds, and other kinds of revenue streams that are just now coming into the fore, the constitutional amendment, and then also generating new forms of revenue via commercial opportunities that might involve, on a very low-key and thoughtful basis, public-private relationships like sponsorship. Those are all things that can get looked at besides property taxes, but the bottom line is, in my opinion, there is not enough money in the system right now for us to maintain a world-class park district, and that needs to get resolved.
Mark, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Megan and I will be right back after this. Stay tuned. Well, be sure to look for the smart car advertising Meg Forney for Parks. That's fun to see driving around District 6. I want to thank you for watching, and thank very much Minneapolis Television Network for having these candidate talk shows.
And I want to thank you, Phil. You've been by my side for many years on Q, etc. I want to thank Mark and Harvey, who are here as guests today. I'm asking for your vote November 3rd. For over 30 years, I've been advocating for parks. I have the proven leadership. It's time. And I want you also to remember that this year we have the opportunity to rank our candidates. So rank Meg as #1, your candidate for District 6 Park Board Commissioner. Thank you.